So here is the prep work. I've got my dry spices. I've got just paper thin. Well, it's not paper thin. Apologies for that expression. It's just relatively thin sheets of zucchini. Got some fresh vine tomatoes and some dark sweet cherry tomatoes. A little bit of sun-dried tomatoes. Well, they're in there, and some sun-dried tomatoes here. And then I lay the sheets out, and then we just kind of start layering it with ingredients. So you'll see what we're gonna start layering it with in just a moment. So right now I have 2 cups of tomatoes chopped up in this bad boy, and I'm just kind of doing this recipe off the top of my head. So this is obviously raw tomato sauce is what I'm aiming at here. Normally I would put a splash of some cold pressed olive oil, but in this instance, this is about a heaping teaspoon of sun-dried tomatoes. Those sun-dried tomatoes were in oil, garlic, herbs, and spices, so I'm gonna omit using any additional oil later for it. Yeah, so I like to do a little bit extra of the sun-dried tomatoes. That seems to always make it a little bit more rich, like it is a real tomato sauce that's cooked in flavor. And then from there, I'm going to just add herbs and spices. Right here, I just added 3 really large basil leaves, and I just chopped them up before I threw them in there so they don't get stuck to the side of the blender. And then, so far, all the fresh ingredients that I only have the tomatoes, the sun-dried tomatoes, I have the sweet cherry tomatoes, and then sometimes I throw random pieces of zucchini in there just for good luck. I don't know what it is about it, but something that we do here. And then this is fresh garlic. I don't want the garlic to overpower it, even though it will be in the dehydrator long enough to calm it down. I just want, two big pieces for these 2 cups of tomatoes. And like I said, I always chop them up just to make sure that the blender will get them. Make sure that the blender gets them. And then from there, I need to balance this with a little bit of sweetness. So this is 2 dates that I've soaked, just 2, about 100 calories of carbohydrate of date. I'm gonna strain out some of that date soaked water. I don't want all of it. I don't want all of it, but I will use a little bit because I am gonna add fresh water here to make sure the blender spins to puree the sauce up enough to be like a ragu or whatever that kind of sauce is. It's very thin, a thin Italian sauce. Next is dry ingredients. So I know some people don't like using dry ingredients, so don't use them if you don't want to, but I don't mind eating them. Most of our stuff's organic. It may be baked, but that's not, it's such an infinitesimal amount of calories that to me, it's worth it. Now, obviously, if you're putting too much spice in your food, that's probably not, a good thing. But for me, if I'm making a raw lasagna, which is more of a dish that you make as a conversation piece, it's got a good amount of onion powder, and then, so 2 parts onion powder, and then 1 part garlic, so not quite as much garlic. If you want, you can add fresh onion too here. I usually do, but I don't feel like chopping it up, so I'm not gonna end it. I just ended up using a little bit more of the dried onion powder. As far as additional dried, this is basil. It has fresh basil, but I just wanna round out the basil flavor because most of the Italian, dishes typically have a dried basil that is, somehow incorporated in the sauce. And then, so I want a good amount of that because basil and oregano are your main 2 Italian seasonings. So there's a decent amount of that. And then here's my oregano. And then I want to make sure I do a good amount of oregano, a little bit more than the basil because it makes sauce taste like sauce. And then I have just some here and there's. This is just a little bit of parsley, a tiny bit of thyme. These are backup ingredients, not the primary Italian ingredients here. Thyme. And then this is just a generic Italian seasoning that I'll use a little bit of just for backup. And then of course, you're gonna need the salt. So I initially begin to spin it first before with a little bit of salt, what I think is a little bit, and then I'll continue to taste it as it spins just to make sure I get the perfect tomato sauce. So here we go. Now, before I get this ripping here, I did want to do about 1 small cap worth of apple cider vinegar. And also, while I'm at it, I did want to mention that for some reason I kind of like to add nutritional yeast to the mix. So if you don't like nooch because it's got that nutty kind of weird flavor, don't add it. I'm not putting a lot, I'm just using it like it was one of the other ingredients, one of the other dried ingredients. So here we go. A quick pro tip, if you are, man, that smells amazing. I got my face right next to it. Holy crap. Pro tip though, make sure you scrape the sides down with a spatula as you see me doing. For some reason, some of the initial blasts kind of knock a ton of the ingredients to the walls, and if some of those were dried ingredients, you want to make sure they get kind of pushed back down into the mix. Also notice I didn't need to add any water because these tomatoes were juicy enough. Another pro tip, if you want to make your sauce extra rich, go ahead and chop your tomatoes early and put them in a strainer so that all the juice from them liquidates, so it's not as acidic or watery. So now that that's been done, I'm gonna pop the top back on, give it a spin, and then give it a taste test. Now I don't know if you can see this here because it's a bit dark, but this is a very thick, substance. Can't get a good angle, and that's what you want. So long as it's still spinning while it's on, but is as thick as it can be, is the best way to get your sauce super thick and concentrated, which will make for really rich tomatoes. The thickness is exactly what you want, as you just seen it spinning, but still very thick. Now, the most crucial thing about making any sauce, and I don't just mean this tomato sauce, but as with all raw sauces, after your first good blend through, if you're making a creamy, like pureed, well blended sauce, you'd want to just jump in there and get a decent amount. Don't play shy with it. Get a good amount. And wow. Okay. And then you give it a taste and see what it needs. So right here is good. But each batch is different. Some tomatoes are really strong, sometimes they're really weak. So you really got to taste test it to rebalance it and then give it a spin. And so right now what I'm noticing is I actually made this one a little too dense. So I'm going to add a little bit more acid because it is pretty sweet from the dates. And I did put right amount of salt. So what I'm going to do is give it another spin with a tiny bit more salt and a little bit of acid, and probably a little bit more nooch, and then we're gonna give it a taste again. All right, class, so this is what it looks like. And I'm gonna give it one more taste test with a clean spoon. Give it a little checkaroo. That is gonna be tasty. You can use this pasta, you can use this same tomato sauce on a zucchini pasta, zucchini kelp noodle pasta. It's really pretty versatile. Any sort of tomato sauce you want, you can use it for, and it's great for dehydrating on crackers. We use it for pizzas. So yeah, that's my standard tomato sauce that I'll be using for the raw lasagna. And then part 2, we're gonna make a cheesy sauce next. Here we have 3 cups of soaked almonds. There were almonds I soaked overnight in the refrigerator. Like this. I strained them and rinsed them really well. You gotta rinse your nuts when you soak them really well. And then inside I put 3 cloves of garlic, and this is 2 small shallots, so I mean like a quarter or an eighth of a big onion. And then I put this cream over it. This has the juice of 1 whole lemon, freshly squeezed into it. And then cheese is known for being cheese because it's got that kind of sour tang to it, and that's what the lemon is gonna do to help combat the fats and creaminess of the almonds. The onions and garlic are just for, the shallots and garlic are just for flavor. And then on this one, we're gonna use a good amount of garlic powder. And I'm not gonna use any onion powder because there's a whole shallot in there. And then a frightening amount of fresh pepper. If you have your pepper on its finest mode, meaning closest to a powder. And I really give a good amount to it, because you still can't taste it nearly know how much you put in it. It's pretty hard to pull the flavor out of the pepper in your sauce. A gracious amount of nutritional yeast in this sauce. If you don't want it, you don't have to use it, but that's a heaping mound. Of course, cheese is also known for being rather salty, and so we're going to accomplish that with, we got pink crystal salt. If you have Celtic sea salt, you could use that to have a little bit more minerals. And then we give it a whirl. The consistency of the sauce is smooth enough as you just seen it spinning, but still pretty thick. And that's what you want, something that you can get through a squeeze bottle. And then, again, as always, you want to taste it to see where it's at. And with the cheese sauce, you definitely want to taste it to make sure where it's at. Like this one, for instance, needs more tartness and a little bit more saltiness to get it closer to a cheese. And so you just play with it until it tastes great to you. To kick up the tangy, I'm using apple cider vinegar. That's 1, and that's 2 overflowing caps. I'll probably do a 3/4 of a cup, just a little bit more. And then a little bit more salt. That should be good. And again, a ton of it, cracked pepper. And then give it a whirl again and see what you got. Oh, by the way, another pro tip, the water that I use to fill this up is the absolute coldest water that I have that doesn't contain ice cubes. You're gonna wanna use cold water because spinning this much in the Vitamix is definitely gonna heat up the mixture, and you don't wanna be killing all this hard work that you're working for, so use cold water. That's pretty tasty. Rawsagna. And seasoned to taste. Here we have macadamia nuts. We've soaked them for 8 hours in purified water. Right now we're juicing some lemons so that we can mix it and make a macadamia nut ricotta and add that to the delicious lasagna. The outcome of the ricotta, it looks very much like a ricotta. And it's got that nice kind of like lemony sort of sour taste to it. Adds a nice fluffy texture to the mix. So now I'm taking the raw tomato sauce. I'm gonna apply my first layer of tomato sauce to the zucchini in a very nice but also relatively liberal fashion. Just getting it, nicely coated and rich with flavor, because the zucchini will soften up in the dehydrator and it will absorb some of the flavor of the tomato sauce, making it a lot closer to what a pasta noodle that may have soaked up some of the tomato sauce. Camera. Okay, now I have some very Very thin tomatoes, as you can see here, very thin. That just makes it taste all the better. And what I'm doing right now is adding one layer of tomatoes right on top of the tomato sauce. Also, again, evenly dispersed across the top of the lasagna. And these dehydrate up so fantastically inside this mixture. It's quite impressive. Now, get your hands clean because this ricotta is very mushy-like, and so it's kind of hard to really get quite flat and evenly mixed across the lasagna, but you do the absolute best that you can. You know, if you like the ricotta more, then add more, and if you like less, then that's fine. A lot of these flavors are gonna kind of blend together as it dehydrates when all the juices start coming out of everything. So that's a pretty good level of ricotta right there. And then what I want to do on top of this ricotta is just use my standard cheese sauce, and I'm gonna add a nice coating to the top of the ricotta, just to give it an extra flavor. Notice I'm really trying to cover the surface up here pretty good. Just one top coat, and that's now all. I'm gonna lay new strips of zucchini across the way, opposite direction of what I had last. Do your best to fit them together when you're making your mix. Okay, here comes round 2 of El Sugo Rosso, the red sauce, just evenly dispersed all across what you got going on. Get some down there too, nicely moved about. You definitely want to cover the tops of all your zucchini that you have on here, just like that. A nice liberal layer. You really want there to be more in here than there was on the bottom layer. Get this one nice and tasty. And then we're gonna continue to layer it. Alright, so now I've added another layer of tomatoes. I'm gonna have some very, very thinly shaved onions that I'm putting in this next level. You don't want too much because onion's pretty powerful and it can get spicy, and so you want to make sure you do those nice and thin so they just add a wonderful flavor to that next layer. Add a little bit of garlic powder over that, and a little bit of nooch on top of that level, just for added flavor. Pinch of salt, crack of pepper, whatever other spices that you want to use, feel free to get down on. That's what next, like halfway through. I'm gonna do one more, not as thick coat as the last one, just to get something for the zucchini to stick to and something to let all the sauces out, flavors of the sauce out. Getting there. Now we're just putting the last layer of zucchini strip on top of this before we top it all off. Perfect, and then sauce one more time. It's a rather saucy mixture, although this time we don't really want the sauce to shine on top so much as we want the actual cheese that's going to cover this entire thing to shine more. And so this one is not as saucy as the other 2 levels or layers. This one's a little bit less, and you'll see why. So now, again, as per usual, your tomato level or layer of tomatoes on top. And again, still pretty thin layers of tomato. Just add what we can to the top loosely so it has some. And then it is party time. So now we're gonna start saucing the top. And don't be shy with this stuff. You really can't go wrong. Just completely encapsulating this mixture here. I want to get a good zigzag on this. And then here's another pro tip that I wanted to share with you guys. So seeing as this is almost completely covered in cheesy sauce now, what I'm going to grab is from the refrigerator. We have a sort of dill sauce. It kind of tastes like ranch, and so we used it on a salad the other night. But what I like to do, you'll notice how it's green because it has more green onion and dill in it. And I like to add that across the top. So it gives our cheese another set of layer of flavors. It's almost like different dimensions to the flavors that we have going on. And then this is almost done here. I put just on top of my cheese, I'm adding a tiny bit of shaved onion that I already have here. Just a tiny bit. And a couple shakes of, here's that, oh sorry, that's onion powder. A little bit more of the garlic powder. It's Trader Joe's. It should have been a raw or organic one, but unfortunately it wasn't. These are little bits of sun-dried tomatoes that we chopped up to add another pop of flavor to lasagna. Step is to take this monster and throw it in the dehydrator, and we'll see this tomorrow. Now, these are my equivalent to French bread pizzas. They're pretty much just zucchini, cheese, and sauce, and then of course that bad boy right there. Ooh.